I did read through the Ask Iwata book. So about Satoru Iwata, the former Nintendo CEO, president, former president of HAL Labs, and programmer of many games, including Smash Brothers, which is kind of nuts when you think about it. So just to be clear, like this book is certainly not a sort of, biography or autobiography. It is approved by his family. Just to sort of, frame it. So he did pass away 5 years of cancer and relatively young age. It was like about 55, 56, which is pretty nuts because it's probably younger than, my folks, or definitely younger than my folks. And it's way too young to die, obviously. But yeah, he was a really, really interesting person. And essentially the book is a collection of the essays that he wrote, but also reflections from people that know him. So for instance, one of probably my, Walt Disney Tesla slash, those kind of cats, for me is Shigeru Miyamoto. I love that guy. He's kind of the, to me, the most impressive. He'd be the number one person I'd want to meet on the planet, living or dead. And it's from the book, I didn't know about this beforehand, but from the book, I'd found out that they would have every single Monday lunch together for, the last, whatever it is, 10, 20 years. And that's just crazy
really cool.
to me. And it's really funny. There's a really cute little story because, it's a lot of Iwata's essays. And also, by the way, the book is very short. So it's, 150-ish pages. So it's a very easy read to get through and very structured. So, you can jump in at any point. But there's a really cute kind of interchange that's, I guess it's on purpose by the translator, but it doesn't seem like the people involved knew. But Iwata was in one of the essays talking about Miyamoto and just his style and, what he would all be about and how he's very much obsessed about ideas, solving multiple problems. And he was talking about how he is the number one follower of Miyamoto, that he's always been the biggest fan of him. And, I'm the number one follower of you. And then right at the end of the book, it has a few of the key figures in Iwata's life. And Miyamoto was one of the ones who penned essentially a short essay about Iwata. And at one point in his essay, Miyamoto's essay, he actually said, I always thought it was really weird with Iwata. He'd always give me praise. He'd call me he's the number one follower of me. And I just loved how like that little interchange between the two men. And especially with Japanese culture, which is very conservative and, it's all about, respecting people. And it's quite interesting. You'd read things like Miyamoto is older than Iwata by about 10 years. And even there's a part where he references when Iwata became the president of Nintendo at the age of 42, how Miyamoto framed it as some people may think that I would have been upset that the younger man, got to the presidency and stuff like that. And I was just thinking, wow, it's funny in like Western, Anglo-Saxon culture, that's not really a thing that people think about too much. That, the CEO is 45 and I'm 50. This is not fair. Or like, I personally don't hear that at work at all. It's just not quite a common thing, but it seems very ingrained in Japanese culture. And yeah, it's just like, oh man, there's like so much in the book. There's parts where he even talks about how they're quite similar, Nintendo to Apple, in trying to drive simplicity. But one thing, like, and he actually calls out and kind of throws Apple under the bus, and I thought it was funny, that he said, oh, look, we would never sacrifice the thickness of a device if that means that that device is not going to be as strong or it's going to fall apart and things like that.
Now that explains the Wii U controller.
Yeah, but then again, you could look at the Joy-Cons and go, wow, come on, guys. Like, that's the flip side of it.
I mean, in general, Nintendo stuff's always
that
historically been sturdy, so...
But the Joy-Cons have happened after Iwata.
Technically, that's true as well. Yeah. I mean, he did, like, so one thing about Iwata is I don't feel like he gets enough praise as he probably should. Even myself, I really think more about people like Miyamoto, but Iwata did oversee like the kind of the biggest that Nintendo has ever been, really. Like when they were selling the Wii and the DS, they were selling like 40-50 million units per year. It was insane combined, and much more than the Switch is selling now, which is about 20-22 million a year. I think the peak was about 30 to 40 million back in the day with the Wii and the DS combined. And he was just very. It's quite interesting to see how he's very particular on certain things. Like he was adamant it was going to be called the Wii Remote, and then he wanted it to look like a remote, and just so like someone like my mom grabs it and is like, "Oh, this is a remote control, not a controller." And I could go on and on about it. Covers the birth of Smash Brothers is quite interesting. But one of the things I just wanted to call out, and given that we are running long, I'll wrap up soon. But that on Earthbound, which is very, it's kind of like a cult classic, but you can't really call it that. But it has that kind of vibe about it. So with Earthbound, back in the day with SNES games, they would spend 3 years to spit out games, and Earthbound got stuck in development hell. So it got to a point where it was like 4 years in, and they really weren't anywhere close to closing and finishing out the game. And the team actually got Iwata, so he was at HAL Labs at the time, to come across to run the game and to like almost come in and step in as the producer. So he looked at everything, and he's a programmer as his start, and he's got that whole famous line as, on my business title, it says that I'm a president. In my head, I'm a game developer, but in my heart, I'm a gamer. But, he's very driven as a developer. He's got that massive technical skill. He looked at the whole project, and I probably would have approached this in a completely different way, but he's actually sat down with the whole team and said, okay, we have a choice, and the choice is your choice. It's not my choice. I've come in as an outside person to help. So the choice is what the game is right now, Earthbound. We'll give it 2 years to fix it. The alternative is we get rid of everything and start from scratch, and we finish it in 6 months. What do you want to do? Right. And I'm like, I quite love the framing of that. And the whole team said, well, yeah, let's start from scratch and finish the game in 6 months. And they did finish it roughly in that amount of time. And they were able to leverage all the assets that they had and all that kind of stuff. But it was that mentality of going, well, we can't hold on to, they've got themselves into a situation where they just can't work through it. It's going to be more work to reverse it and do all of this kind of stuff rather than, come up with some stuff from scratch. So really, really interesting. Actually talks a bit about the theory around pricing with Nintendo. So he was very adamant that, in the industry and what the expectation is, you release a piece of hardware or software or something like that, and then over time, you lower the price. But his view was, if you do that, it sort of devalues it. So then someone who goes, oh, why would I buy on day one? I'm going to get ripped off in day, year 3 or year 4, it's going to be cheaper. So why don't I just wait? So he was just simply like, why don't you keep it roughly at the same price? You might have a few drops, but you create a situation where people go, well, there's no reason why I shouldn't buy it on day one. And I must admit, they've carried that through still to today. And it's part of the reason why a lot of the times I'll buy Nintendo games on day one, because it's like, you're going to be waiting forever for a very minor decrease in price, and nothing that you'd see on PS4 or, PS5 and Xbox as well. So it's a really cool book, like worth reading. It's very short. And if you're a nerd like me around this kind of stuff, it's very good. It's certainly not one of the greatest gaming books ever, but it's well worth read.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, and I think it's very telling how respected he is by everyone in industry. I kind of honestly miss that era of Iwata, Reggie, and Miyamoto kind of as like the figureheads. But at some point, maybe we'll get some good faces in Nintendo and stuff. So.
Yeah, and he was a very good and kind person, and as a business person, the fact that he decided on himself to voluntarily cut his salary when Nintendo performed poorly with the Wii U and then post
I remember
Wii
that.
era.
That was amazing.
And they literally did it. And then also he got the board of directors of Nintendo to cut their pay as well by 20-30%. And they did it primarily so that they didn't have to retrench people at Nintendo, which is legitimately the exact opposite of what, Activision and EA do, where they...
And just about any other company, really. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so it's quite different. And he did seem like everything you read about him and in this book, the fundamental thing is how kind he is. And one thing that keeps coming through as a thread in the book is what a good father he is and how different that is in Japanese culture. And he seemed like a really kind person. And he talks about his children, which is quite uncommon in Japanese culture. So very cool guy. Very sad that he passed away relatively so young, really, like most people, especially in Japan, live to 80 to 90. So, but he, shone brightly, and it's a really great book, and it's a great tribute to him, which, I was really glad to see and glad to finally read it, because it's still not available in Australia, which is a bit frustrating. So I'll get my hard copy version eventually whenever it comes to Australia.
I think it comes out in May.
We're running, well, it's been delayed. They reckon May, June, or July now.
We are in May.
We are running late, so let's get into our next and final feature. And that is Game of Summer of the Year.